Okay, we're going to get started here in a minute. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and apologies for some of the technical difficulties tonight. We are actually offering tonight's session in 4 languages, which are English, Spanish, Russian, and Mandarin. The instructions here, if you'd like to listen in on any language other than English, please look at the globe icon at the bottom of the screen and select the language you wish to listen in. And you will be able to hear Gigi Margarita, who is our Spanish translator, Konstantin Konstantin Srichevsky, sorry, for Russian, and Manyi Tang, who's speaking in Mandarin. At any point during the evening, please submit your questions through the Q&A option. I know that they're going to come up. We've been doing these for quite some time, so please don't be shy and add your questions using the Q&A function. And finally, at the close, when you exit, you'll be prompted to complete a survey. We would love your feedback at any time, but certainly if you could give us some feedback, that would be fantastic. Okay, and it looks like we're having issues with our Russian translation now at the moment. So I apologize for that. We'll try and figure out how to enable him in a minute. But I do want to welcome you. We have 27 schools represented tonight. I'd love to see in the chat, please say hello from wherever you are, the name of your school or your state, put it in the chat and say hello. Representing 17 states. So thanks so much for being with us tonight, and do say hello to the rest of your fellow participants, if you will, in the chat. So I want to get to know you a little bit better. And one of the things that would help me is to know how old is your oldest child. So please use the polling function and select one of the following: A, 5 years old or younger, 6 to 10 years old, 11 to 14, or D, 15 or older. Select A, B, C, or D. How old is your oldest child? This gives me a sense of where most of you are in terms of your parenting journey when it comes to technology. Fantastic. Okay, it looks like most of you are in that sweet spot of 11 to 14 years old. Welcome to welcome to some fun times. And the next group is the 6 to 10 years old, where I'm sure this past year probably was quite challenging. But congratulations to all of you for getting through to this point. You're incredibly resilient as parents, and your children are too. The next thing I'd like to understand is, how are your children attending school? How are your children, how have they been either now or in the past? So are they hybrid, A, remote, sorry, A, hybrid, B, or in person, C? Remote, hybrid, or in person. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so most of you are back. You're in person. Maybe at some point in the past you were either remote or hybrid, and then the next group is remote. So, you know, we know from all of the studies that we're all over the map. And I think one of the things that we have learned is that we needed technology more than ever over this past year. And I want to say to the parents out there who maybe allowed a little more screen time this past year than you would have liked, that's okay. We had no other time in history to guide us through something like this. And your children will be fine. You may have discovered new habits that you want to keep. You may have discovered habits that you don't want to keep. A lot did change over the past year, but I ask you to do one thing as you think about the other side of the pandemic, when everything becomes somewhat like before. Don't wait until that moment. Think now about the ways in which technology helped you, helped your children, and what parts of your use of technology you want to keep going forward. Maybe you signed up for Disney Plus for the first time and you want to begin, continue those family movie nights, or maybe you learned how to do Zoom sometime within the last year. You hadn't used it before, and you want to keep those family reunions going virtually into the future. So think about that. But even though a lot did change over the last year, there's a lot of things that did not. And the first is that our children still need our guidance. And it is more important than ever before to make sure that we're understanding what the risks are to them, because they still are there. But also appreciate what the benefits are with technology. Because, there's certainly a lot of things that we probably learned you could do to supplement learning, or even, like I said, stay in touch with people from far away that you hadn't known before. But that is why teaching our kids to be good digital citizens is more paramount than ever. Okay, more paramount than ever. So what do we mean by digital citizenship? We break this up into 4 parts. The first is, yes, the risks. We still need to know the risks and how to avoid them. But it's also about digital literacy, the how do I actually use these technologies in ways that are safe and beneficial to me? So for example, if your child is writing a paper, what is the best source to lean on for information or sources to write that paper? Is it Wikipedia or is it not? Ask a librarian what they think, by the way, of Wikipedia. Or how do I, if I know that I need to keep things private, how do I actually turn on privacy settings? Where are the privacy settings? It's also about how we behave. How do we behave towards others? How do we carry ourselves in online communities when there are rules? And finally, it's about mastery. Very often when we talk to children about using technology, it's really a long list of what not to do. We have to remember, and we have to balance that with all of the ways that they should be using technology, the way that they can use technology to be productive, the way they can use technology to help themselves, others, or the world around them. So we've got to balance the lists of what not to do with lists of ways they should be using technology. So we like to talk about a wide range of issues in this program. So I'm going to be sharing a lot of information with you tonight, and I encourage you to ask questions as I go along. Some of it I will skip over just to keep it, to time, and some of it I'll delve into a little more deeply based on your questions. But we like to think about the range of issues when it comes to raising good digital citizens along 4 areas. The first is about being online. What does that mean for you as a parent as you guide your child? And you think about how to set up the right environment so they can be safe, healthy, and successful. How do you set
Как установить?
How do you So setting up the environment, the rules, and a good example for your children. On being safe, we talk about how do you protect your privacy, your personal information, and yourself, your physical self as well. On being kind, how are you behaving towards others, but also how are you directing kindness to yourself? We're going to talk about why that's very important, especially for those of you with children in that 11 to 14 age range, as they begin to explore social media and all that comes with it. Finally, savviness is about encouraging good habits and good uses of technology. So, I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but one of the things that was very specific to the past year, and for those of you whose children are still going to school in a remote model, doing the things that support their physical health is part of this conversation too. And again, you've probably already set a lot of this up since you've been doing it for some time. The one I really like to encourage is taking care of your eyes. So for those of you who are not aware, there's a great habit you can teach your kids called the 30-30-30 rule. And the 30-30-30 rule means that every 30 minutes, you should look away for about 30 feet for 30 seconds to rest those eyes. Another way to do it is to just get up and move around. Just move, take your eye away from the screens every 30 minutes. And families this past year have told me they've invested in blue light glasses. You can buy them. They're very inexpensive on Amazon. They do not require any kind of prescription. They're like sunglasses, except they're not dark. And they protect that blue light coming off the screens from damaging the back of your eye. And, again, if you're on screens a lot more now, it's a good thing to invest in. Not very expensive. You can buy them in packs of 4 or 6 on Amazon. In terms of other environment issues, the network is another one. Again, you've probably figured out a lot of this already, but if you have bought a new router over the past year, or if you, even if you've had one for a while, many times people never change the password that came with it. So if you haven't changed the password on your router in a while, I highly recommend you do that. Another thing that you can do is actually split the network. And what I mean by that is very often your router allows for a main network and a guest network. And it's a good idea to have your more sensitive devices, perhaps that's yours for work, or a desktop that contains lots of financial information or family photos that you don't want to lose. Put that on the main network. But on the guest network, you can put things like your children's gaming devices or iPads, or even their phones at this point. And so you can split that by putting them on the guest network. And each of those networks that someone can choose would have a different password to each of them. The reason you want to do that is if your child's devices are ever compromised, it will not impact the other devices on the main network. Just in case your child accidentally clicks on something or taps on something on their iPad or whatever, which could happen, then you should definitely consider splitting your network. There's a question here in the chat. If you'd like to listen in Espanol, please select the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select the language you would like to listen to. And also, this presentation is being recorded. So if you would like to get a copy of the recording afterwards, we do make that available. I'm going to give you my contact information at the end so you can get the copy of the link. Okay? Great. Wi-Fi extenders are great if you have too many people on your network at one time, or if you are trying to move to another part of the house and the connection in that part of the house is not great. The Wi-Fi extender can help make that connection better all around the house. And talking to each other about when you're going to be online, so that if you're trying to have a Zoom meeting and your child is trying to play a game, you don't want everybody on it at the same time. So have those morning conversations. Maybe you've already been doing this, and good for you if you have. But if you haven't, that's a good thing to do. Other things to consider in setting up your home is to really secure everything. Again, the reason is your children may not be doing it on purpose, but they could be clicking on things that could be, at risk for them and for you, since you do have, you own the bill to the internet connection in your home, and you also own the devices that they're using. So every device that they use, every device you use, make sure it has security software. That includes cell phones, okay? There are several great review sites out there. If you just search for the top 10 security software options for your home devices, you will find many. Trend Micro, the company I work for, offers them, but so do many others. You may have them already installed on your laptops. You just need to renew the subscriptions. Make sure you have that. And one of the features in there is a firewall. And the firewall basically takes a look at the traffic coming in and out of your device. And it's like a bouncer. It says that's okay to come in and that's not okay to come in. So make sure that is also turned on. I'll show you in a minute an exercise you could do with your children about practicing great password skills, but make sure they're strong. Multi-factor authentication is something we highly recommend as well. That's a mouthful, multi-factor authentication. But if you look in Facebook or Instagram or even Roblox, sometimes they call it two-step verification or two-step authentication. What is this? This is basically like a second lock. The password is the first lock. This two-step authentication is the second lock. And the reason it's important to have that turned on is because if someone ever got a hold of your password, they wouldn't be able to get into your account, because this second step requires that information is being sent to a different place that only you can access. That different place could be the text on your cell phone. You get a code telling you to type in the text, even after you've already done the password, or it sends it to your email address. So again, if someone steals your password, they will not be able to necessarily break into your accounts if you have multi-factor authentication on. I bet a lot of people don't have this on their kids' apps. So Roblox does have it. If it's not turned on, consider turning it on. I'll show you in a second how you can do that. Same thing with TikTok, same thing with Instagram, and so on. Finally, if you're connecting anywhere outside your home, consider using a virtual private network. This just makes sure that the content in travel from your device to the website or the app that it's going to is secure. Again, you can do a search on Google or your favorite search engine. Look up the best VPN offerings software out there, and you'll find lots of options. So on those good habits, just to kind of close out setting up the environment, update all the time. We noticed over the pandemic that more updates were happening on apps because these cyber criminals knew this past year everybody was online a lot more. So they've been trying a lot of tricks to fool your kids, to fool you. And the updates many times contain security fixes. Somebody's discovered a security vulnerability. So how do you patch that? Update. Make sure you're always updating. And you can set it to automatic update on your phone, but it drains the battery very quickly. So if you're going to do that, make sure you're plugged in before you do that, because you might have a lot of apps. It takes up a lot of power from your device. Good password habit, something you can work with your kids on, and you change them very regularly on the devices and apps that they use. So the longer the password, the stronger it is. Yes, you should add a special character, but the longer it is, the stronger it is. So unfortunately, many sites don't let you write huge sentences. You are limited. So one way to create a great password is to think of a sentence with your kids and use only the first letters of each word as your password, and then throw in a special character like an exclamation point or a at sign, and then change them regularly. So, I had fun here with, I might need to buy more toilet paper soon, but your kids could come up with anything. So it's a good habit to practice with them as young an age as possible, so that in the future, they're always thinking about, I've got to do I've got to change my passwords. It's time to do it. And finally, back up everything. Apple gives you some for free, some space, so does Google. But ultimately, when that runs out, you've got to pay. So my recommendation is, if you can pay for it, great. But the other thing you can do is also buy those hard drives. If you can afford it, I would recommend doing both. And I'm speaking from personal experience, that if one gets compromised in some way, you at least have the other one. So in our case, the hard drive was dropped, and thankfully the cloud version was available. So, I recommend doing both if you can. On the tech tools, there's actually a lot of stuff available to you. I'm going to show you a few in a minute that doesn't even cost you a thing. It's already existing inside the devices you own, or they're free on the internet for you to download. And these tools help you limit things like age inappropriate content, or stopping them from buying too much stuff in the app, limiting the amount of time they're spending on it, or even watching what they're doing with a device or app. So again, they exist in a lot of things that you already own, like a device and like the app themselves. So here's a couple of examples. Is anyone familiar with iOS screen time? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Is this something you're familiar with? Do you use it? Apple launched this about a few years ago, and if you have an iPhone, it's the lovely service you get on Sunday morning, where you hear that little alarm and it tells you you've been using your phone 15% more than you did last week, and it just makes you feel so bad. But this same tool called Screen Time does more than just monitor screen time. If you set up your children with iTunes accounts underneath your own, you would be able to also manage a lot of things on their devices. So in this screenshot, you see, this is my phone. You see at the bottom there, those are my two kids. And if you select one of them, as I have, you'll see that it takes you to the capabilities. And one of the things that you can do is actually get not just the weekly reports. I actually think it's really funny to see how many times they picked up the device. It's kind of very interesting. But you can also do more important things like filter the kinds of content, the age apps that are not for their age, and also limit the amount of screen time they're spending on a particular app. So if you're not familiar with it, that's something I highly recommend if you are an Apple family, if that's something you use in your house. Another option is, anybody use TikTok? Anybody's kids begging you to use TikTok? TikTok actually has done something different, something that all of their predecessors did not do, and they've done a great job of learning from the past people. They introduced something called TikTok family pairing. And this is a way for you as a parent, if you're not ready yet to let your child use TikTok freely, or you don't even think your child is ready yet to just see anything on TikTok, this is a nice way to ease both of you into that experience. And how does it work? Basically, you would need to download TikTok on both your own device as well as the device they are going to use. And you're going to designate one of them as the parents and one of them as the child's. So you find it under a setting called digital well-being. And you can see it here called family pairing. And for the first device, you'll designate that, as you see at the bottom, as the parent one. And the other one you would do as the child. On your device as the parent, what you're able to do now is set limits on how much time they can spend on TikTok, the kinds of content they'll see on TikTok, and even who is allowed to communicate with them on TikTok. And I've tested this, and I can tell you that it's pretty good for the younger kids, because you're not going to see some of that age inappropriate stuff at all. It's pretty harmless, fun stuff. Now, someday they'll be old enough and you don't need to use this as much anymore. But this is a good way to ease them into this. I will also say TikTok does something that none of the other apps that your children love do. They decided that anyone 16 or under using their app will automatically have all the privacy settings on. Okay, every other app, you have to go in and turn on those privacy settings. Okay. All right. It sounds like there's a comment here that you've tried family pairing and restricted mode and you still saw inappropriate things. Yeah. I think that you should report that to TikTok. I think it's like I said, it's largely okay, but a lot of these capabilities are not always perfect. I think another way to manage this is just to use things like screen time to monitor how much time they're spending on it as well. But unfortunately, these are the kinds of challenges with social networks because anyone can be on them. And so I think just short of creating a TikTok for kids under 13, that's the risk of having them allowing them to use apps without supervision. Roblox also has a lot of great capabilities, and I mentioned earlier two-step verification, which you'll see here in a minute, but they actually, have done a pretty good job, I think, of allowing filtering of content. So Roblox, for those of you who aren't familiar, is basically a platform of lots of games. So the way you do that is you turn on security, put in a code so that only you can change these settings in the future. Once you've set up that code, now you can go back and set privacy settings like who can communicate with them. Is it friends or no one? Whatever your choice is, it's up to you. And the only way you can change it is you got to enter that code every time to change those settings. You should know one thing about Roblox. They are very vigilant. The thing about Roblox is there's a lot of free chatting going on. So, arguably your child could be communicating with somebody they don't know, but they're very good about stopping any people from asking for home addresses or even posting a home address or a phone number in those chats. They are very strict about it. Again, not perfect, but I think they do a pretty good job of moderating those communications. A lot of people also think that only young children are on Roblox. That is not true. There's a lot of older teens on Roblox and even older. And the reason is that you can create your own video games in Roblox as well. So kids who are pretty avid gamers, who are very creative, really love Roblox because it allows for so much expression that way. Finally, if you don't use Apple and you are an Android Google family, Google about 3 years ago launched a free tool called Google Family Link. It works a lot like Apple's screen time, and it allows you to manage the kinds of content that your kids are allowed to see, the amount of time they're spending on those devices. And I am happy to announce that just last month, they decided, Google, who owns YouTube, decided to launch something new, which I'll show you in a second here. So these are just some of the features that Google Family Link can do. But they launched last month a feature called the YouTube Supervised Account. So before now, your younger children could download YouTube for Kids, and all they would see is content that YouTube decided was very friendly for younger kids, really little kids. The other option was to get on YouTube and go freely wandering on YouTube. That was it. Those were your choices. But last month they announced YouTube supervised accounts, and this is the answer for the children who are telling you YouTube for Kids is way too, that's for babies, mom and dad, and you're not yet ready for them to just search for anything on YouTube. So those ages between 10 and 17. Okay, it's still in beta. I plan on sharing information about it on my, I'll show you later on how you can stay in touch with me. But as soon as it's available to you, I think this is a wonderful idea finally that they've come up with. And you'll be able to decide whether they can see content that's, they're saying it's explore more, or most of YouTube, but it won't allow them to see any content that's for 18 and above still. It's just better than YouTube for kids because that's Elmo. And many of your kids, based on what you told me here tonight, are too old probably. I still love Elmo though. So, you know, are you ever too old for Elmo? Okay. Here we go. So setting the rules is really just 5 things you need to think about. And when you decide these rules, it's a great idea to have your children, you know, get them involved in this conversation about the rules, especially not just what the rules are, but what are the consequences if they break those rules. They are more apt to stick to the rules that they had some role in creating. And if they have siblings, by the way, involve them too, because siblings do a great job of holding each other responsible to those rules, to the point sometimes where you don't even have to do anything. Okay, so the first rule is, what are they allowed to use? Very often, a child will come home or come to you one day and say, Mom, Dad, can I please download this app? Can I please get this video game? And you're going to do some homework, right? And, you know, my recommendation is to use a resource called Common Sense Media. commonsensemedia.org is a great organization that does wonderful third-party reviews of apps, games, websites. They also do movies, by the way, and television shows and books. And if any of you have ever tried to pick a movie out with kids of multiple ages, it's nearly impossible to agree on anything. But they can make some great recommendations, and it's certainly saved us as a family more than once on making those decisions. But if an app has not been heavily reviewed yet, I would recommend not trying that right away. You know, checking out its privacy settings. If it has none, you know, that's something you might want to steer away from as well. When and for how long they're allowed to use whatever technology it is. And I'm going to show you in a minute something called the 24-hour exercise that you can use with your children when you're trying to decide about screen time in any given day. But it is part of the rules. When are they allowed to use it, such as after the homework is done, or how long they're allowed to use it, you know, only for an hour, for example. Where and with whom are the final things to consider in the rules. Again, during the pandemic, the where might have only been your house, but before the pandemic and after, they might be at a friend's house, and you know, it's a good idea to talk to other families to say things like, you know, we're not allowing first person shooter games yet in our house. So if your child's going to another person's house and you know they might be using the gaming devices, you know, let the other parent know that. And with whom, the younger they are, the better it is to stick to just the people that you know. As they get older, though, you will need to expand that circle of people that they're conversing with. And your child will show you over the years, by the way they behave, by the way they, you know, are following these rules, and just by showing their maturity to you of whether or not you're okay with them to start adding people to the network of those that they're communicating with, gaming with, connecting on social media with, online. So what do I mean by the 24-hour rule or exercise? It's a great idea, you know, when your kids are trying to say to you, I really want to play Xbox. That's great. That's fine. But let's talk about a particular day, right? And have them write this down, or you can write it for them if they're not old enough to do this yet. But have them think about the fact that there's only 24 hours in a day. And so part of that time is spent doing things that are really good for their health. So ask them, how many hours did you sleep? How much time did you spend having meals? How much time did you spend exercising or being outside? Another way to support them is to say, how much time did they spend supporting themselves as students, as learners? So how much time were they in school spending on their homework, doing things like reading or practicing an instrument or another skill that, broadens their mind and teaches them something new. On top of that, how much time did they spend in that 24 hours supporting the relationships that are important in their lives? So with your immediate family, maybe with a family that's far away and they could have been just chatting with them on FaceTime, that still supports the relationship with friends and neighbors. Now, whatever's left, there's time left, right? And they've done all of these things that are really good and important and healthy for them. So with that time left over, some suggestions are to create a menu or an activity box. Some parents have their children write ideas down on a piece of paper, fold it up and put it in a box. And from it, they can pick out activities that time left over they can use doing. Some of those activities could be screens, and some of them could not. Could be playing board games, card games, drawing, doing something outside. And that's a good way to help children start to think about, the finite amount of time there is in a day and all of the things that are also really good and important for them fitting in with the things that they want to do just for fun, right? And it does not mean if the time left over is 5 or 6 hours, it doesn't mean they should be on screens for 5 or 6 hours. That's where your rules and the tools that we talked about previously can help you manage that screen time. Finally, on setting a good example, you don't need to answer this here, but you should answer this question for yourself. What rules do you have for yourself when it comes to technology? Do you charge your phone next to the bed at night, or do you put it in a different room? Do you leave the phone far away from the dinner table when you're sitting down to dinner together? What do your children see you and your relationship with technology? Because they're more apt to follow what they're seeing you doing as a role model. And finally, so ask yourself those questions, and if you've got some good habits, please share them on the chat. I'd love to hear them. I could use some work on my own habits for sure. I'm going to pause right now just to see any questions here. How do you separate the networks? Basically, this is going to be different depending on your router. So I would recommend just doing search the support area of whatever brand of router you have and look up how to set up a guest network. Look up how to set up a guest network. And that way, once you've set them both up, when you're connecting to a Wi-Fi at your own house, you're going to see both options. Then whatever you've named your network and then whatever you've named your guest network. And both of them should be visible. And once you've set those up, your child's device should connect to the guest network and yours should connect to the main network. And that's how you separate them. Okay, great. We have a comment here. We love Elmo. Good. I love Elmo too. This is great. He's great. He's very funny, actually. I think some of the jokes kind of go over some of the kids' heads. Can you restate how to get a copy of the presentation? Oh, yes. So at the end of the presentation, I'm going to give you some contact information. And this will be, the session is being recorded. So you will be given the link. If you make a request to my email, we will send you a copy of the link, which has the recording. All right. And let's see. I'm going to move on here to our next section. So on being safe. Now, it's really interesting because the first thing we usually cover here, our program used to allow us to go in and talk to students. And it was one of my favorite things to do is actually go into classrooms talking to your children about these issues. And they are smart. They're really smart. They've always surprised me of how much they already knew. And so my hope was that I'd actually teach them something they didn't already know. Well, this is one of them about privacy. Okay, so the obvious thing to do to protect your privacy is to turn on privacy settings. And if you're using an app that doesn't even have privacy settings, I really question whether or not you should be using that app. But this is a screenshot of Fortnite. Anybody's kids love Fortnite? I'm sure you do. I have a 17 and 14-year-old now, so it was my younger one who really liked it. He has since outgrown it, but he still has friends who like it. But Fortnite, like all the others, do not have privacy settings on by default. So you got to go in there and you got to do it yourself. So make sure every app, every game your kids are using, the privacy settings are on. Here's the thing about privacy. I often go into classrooms and I ask the kids, is TikTok free? Is Instagram free? Is Facebook free? And very often, half of them will raise their hands because I didn't pay any money for it. I just downloaded it. And the other half is sort of saying, I don't think it's free. And I'll ask them why. And they'll say, because advertising. But it's interesting how they made the leap from it's not free because of advertising. That there's something in the middle there that they haven't quite connected. So the funny thing is, all that text that you saw just scroll right past you, we often go right past that legal language when we download an app for the first time. We don't read it. Unless there's someone out there who does read it, go ahead and put it in the chat. And you're my hero if you have read every word. But I don't usually read it very carefully, and a lot of us don't. But in all of the free apps we use, including Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all of them, they have a clause that basically says you own everything you're doing on here, everything you post, whoever you're connecting with, you own that all. But we have the right to use it whenever, wherever, forever. When you hit I accept, you've basically granted this license to them. And though you did not pay money to use the app, you're paying with something else, and that is your personal information. And those sites are, in fact, watching what you're doing, not because they care about you, but they want to know so they can sell that information to advertisers. And the advertisers hope that by knowing you as well as possible, they're going to be able to show you some ad that you're going to love and therefore buy whatever it is they're trying to sell. So your children are right on if you ask them, is it free or not? And if they make the leap to advertising, that's great. But sometimes they don't really know why they're saying that. But the thing about privacy is this. Privacy settings help us make sure that people we don't know see our stuff. But privacy settings do absolutely nothing to protect our privacy from the companies who made those apps. And that is why when we say whatever you do online really isn't ever private, it's because someone is always collecting what they're doing and storing that information. And you hope that they're storing it in a way that is secure. But even those servers where all that information is being stored could be hacked. And so when we tell kids, hey, be careful of what you're posting because nothing's ever really private, we're really not just scaring them. We're actually telling them the technical reasons why that is true. So I know that when I've said this to students, it actually gets them a little bit irritated. And I remember a student asking me, can I please sue Instagram? And I had said to her, well, did you hit I accept? And she said, yes. Then I said, then no, you agreed to these terms. And that's what it means. That's what free means on the internet. Another thing about protecting our safety online is our information. And this is where you want to be careful that cyber criminals are not somehow tricking your kids. They're not targeting your children. Okay, they don't have bank accounts or any necessarily information that would be financially lucrative for them. Most of them are out for money, right, in some way, shape, or form. But because they go where the people are, that your children may be running across the work of a cyber criminal. And if you ever ask your children, and I've asked many students this over the years, have you ever seen a text that was kind of suspicious or a pop-up ad that seemed kind of not right to you? And every hand goes up, and they'll tell you about a time that they saw this thing. And I ask them, well, when you saw that and it looked suspicious, what did you do? And almost all of them tell me that they X'd out of it, because X is now a verb. They X out of it. So, encourage your children to trust their instincts. They definitely are able to tell when something looks suspicious, or if an ad or an offer looks too good to be true, it probably is. But the other reason that, as I said previously, make sure there's security software on every device they're using, is that if they do accidentally click on something that, let's say it was designed to download a malicious software unbeknownst to you, that's sitting there and just waiting to see if you type in a password because it's trying to steal passwords or bank account information, security software will block them from ever doing that download in the first place. So that's why it's important to have that on every device that you and your children are using to connect to the internet. Okay, I've got a question for you, another one. Do any of your children have their own cell phone? Do any of your children have their own cell phone? Yes, no, not yet, or not for a long time. Yes, A. B, no. C, not yet, but soon. And D, not for a few more years. Okay. Oh, we still got lots of people answering here. We got a lot of yeses, I will say. And that makes sense, since a lot of you are in the 11 to 14 age range with your oldest children. Okay, I'm going to end the polling here. So yeah, and eventually all of you will be yes, once your children are old enough. So I want to have just say one thing about the phone. It's a very important conversation. For those of you who have already given your child a phone and you haven't had this conversation yet, please have this conversation, okay? There's one thing about a phone that children love more than anything else. It's the camera. And that camera can cause so much joy in your life. And your children should enjoy it. They should take pictures of the family pet, or each other or themselves. They can have lots of fun with it, for sure. One of the things, though, in our work together with Thorn, who is a nonprofit organization, as well as the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, that we have seen rising over the last year are images of children that they would not want the whole world to see. And I don't necessarily know if there are students on the line here, but so I'll just put it this way. If you are out there, you should never, ever, ever feel pressured to take a photo of yourself by anyone that you would not want your mom, dad, or anybody that you know seeing. You should never feel pressured to do that, ever. And in fact, I discourage you from taking pictures like that. For the parents out there, technically, the production of such images of children who are underage, the possession of it or the distribution of it is technically a felony. It doesn't mean that, kids who are doing this with each other are necessarily going to be punished the way that an adult would be. But the problem is that even taking the photo itself is risky. Let's say they take that photo, but they never send it to anyone. It's just on the phone. However, if that phone is getting backed up in the cloud on a regular basis, then already there's a copy of that photo somewhere else. And you have to hope that wherever it's being stored, it's secure, right? But that's why I think it's never too early to have a conversation with your children about that pressure they might get. And I say pressure because Thorne's research has shown that when they asked children, how old were you the first time you were asked for one of those photos? Children are answering 9 and 10 years old when someone online asked them for one. So we need to have these conversations as young as possible. The second reason is that if they do give in to that pressure and they send it to whoever is asking for it, we don't know who that is online. Our children should know. You never know who it really is that's asking. And there have been cases of extortion where it typically is an adult who says, if you don't send me another one, I'm going to share this with the whole world. And so please, parents, if you haven't had the conversation yet with your children about the camera on this, please do that. It will really, it's one of the safest things you can do for them. On gaming, I would just say, in addition to the rules we talked about, every game is social now. They could play with people they know, and they could be playing with people they don't know. So be cognizant of who they are gaming with online and make sure that you're okay with it. Those privacy settings sometimes allow you to say just friends or friends of friends or so on. But that's up to you to decide what those rules are based on your children's ages. Another thing I will say about gaming is this: if your kids have a hard time, or you have a hard time peeling them away from the game, they don't maybe throw a tantrum because they weren't finished with that game, I highly recommend considering games that are timed. Okay, games like Minecraft are great for so many reasons, but there's really no beginning or end. That's when you have to decide how long is okay to be using it. Another thing about another option for timed games are games like the sports ones. So, NFL Madden or FIFA 2021 or, NBA 2021. There's one that I like. I'm not great at it, but I like it. It's called Rocket League. You're basically just driving a car and hitting a ball into a soccer net. There's also a basketball version of it where the car is just hitting a basketball, trying to get it in. But those games are actually timed. And you can you can sort of boost your time and earn a little bit more, but eventually the game ends because the timer runs out. So, consider whether or not your child, if they have struggles with, really just pulling away from the game, timed games are a great option. Another option is that if you're going to use a timer like iOS screen time, and by the way, Xbox launched in last September a free app called Xbox Family Settings, which allows you to do the same thing that iOS Screen Time or Google Family Link does for Apple and Google devices. Microsoft launched Xbox Family Settings to do exactly the same thing for the Xbox. So you don't even have to go to the Xbox. You just do it all on your phone, and you can tell them, hey, 10 more minutes or 5 more minutes or whatever. Oh, good. We have another Rocket League fan out there. Fantastic. Okay. On being kind, again, this is about how we treat others, but I'll also say a word about how we direct that kindness inward as well. So, at a very young age, our children are already being taught by us and in school, here's what it means to be a good friend, stand up for someone who's being harmed. There's really a lot against unkindness and respect and bullying and so on that they're hearing now. So we should do it because it's the right thing to do. But as we said before, anything they do online, every choice they make, everything they search on, everything they watch, everyone they connect to, anything they're posting, all of that leaves a digital footprint and paints a picture of who they are. And that's what's different about the internet, is that anything we're doing is going to reflect on us. And someday someone can make a decision about the kind of person they are based on those actions. So do it because it's right, but do it because anything you're doing is going to be reflecting on you. And kindness is not just about, hey, don't be mean. Kindness is also about respecting many other things about people's use of technology. Privacy is one. Tell me in the chat, have you ever had someone post a photo that included you in that photo and didn't really ask you to post it and you weren't really happy about it? Has that ever happened to you? Yep. I'm sure it's happened to a lot of you. It definitely has happened to me. And we've had to have an uncomfortable conversation with a family member to say, the next time you post a photo with our kids, can you please just ask us first, because we have one that's very private. And it's uncomfortable in the beginning, but after that, now we're always asked, which is great, but it's important to have these conversations. We should be teaching our children the same idea. The first time they get their phones, all their friends are getting them too. It's like candy, right? Running around in a candy store. They're doing all kinds of things with that phone in that first year that they get it. But you can save them and the other children a lot of heartache, because this particular example has led to a lot of drama in the middle schools. When somebody posts a photo of everybody in it, and some of the kids say, well, of course they posted it because they look good in it, but the rest of us don't look great. And they start whispering behind that kid's back, and it just turns into so much drama a lot of the time. So if our children are encouraged to say, hey, before you post that, just check in with your friends if they're cool with it. You can save a lot of heartache and drama later on for them. The other thing is, not everybody's going to get a phone at the same year. Many of you said your kids already have phones. Some of you said not yet, but soon. I'm not necessarily sure based on the answers how old your children were, but there are families who don't decide to give their children a phone until 13, and others who chose at the beginning of middle school. And that's okay. Everybody's got their own rules and values. So we've got to encourage our children to respect that of other people, and not to use that as a reason to make fun of them or to exclude them. I used to coach a team of 7th and 8th grade girls, and they started a group chat because they just wanted to connect. But the problem was, some of the girls did not have a phone yet. So we told them that if you're going to communicate, make sure you also send an email to them, so at least they don't feel excluded in some way. All right. Another one of those rules might be time offline, or how much time they're allowed even to be on the phone. So even if everyone does have a phone, it doesn't mean everyone's on it at the same times. So a parent told me many years ago that her daughter texted her friend, and her friend did not respond immediately. And her daughter waited and waited and took that to mean that that friend was extremely upset with her. The truth of the matter was, the girl was done using the phone for the day. She wasn't upset with her at all. But the girl involved, who was worried, was so distraught until the next day, basically. And so I think that we have to encourage our kids to think, or remind them that not everybody has the same rules at all. It can save a lot of heartache. So another thing is, for those who are beginning to use social media, we find this ourselves. Anybody use Facebook out there? You can start scrolling and you start thinking, especially during a pandemic, oh, wow, they had a really nice vacation. I haven't even left my house in 10 months. you might start seeing other people's lives, and it might start to bother you that you think yours is not as great as everybody else's, right? So adolescents, teenagers, they feel everything at a magnitude greater than we do, right? When they feel great, they feel really great. When they feel bad, they feel really bad. And if you think that those kinds of feelings happen to you as an adult when you're looking through social media, imagine how much more they experience it as children. So we've got to remind our kids that they're not equal to the numbers of likes or followers or comments that they're getting on their posts at all. That is not their value. They're worth so much more than that. It's really important for us as parents to remind them regularly of this, because there has been research now to show that teens some are really rising in anxiety simply because of the impact of social media on their lives. It's such a curated, version of someone's life that they think is the truth, and it's not necessarily true. So we can support our children. We can do this in a couple of ways. We can nurture kindness, make sure they're being kind, but also feeling kindness by just always being there, checking in with your kids. You know your kids, you know if something's off. But do ask yourself these two questions, and you don't have to answer them now. Be prepared. And these are the two questions to ask yourself. What would you do if your child was ever bullied? And the second question is, what would you do if your child was the one who might be bullying someone else? And hopefully you'll never have to pull out the piece of paper that you write this on, ever. But it is a good idea to think it through. What actions would you take? How would you talk to your kids? Would you involve other parents? Would you contact the school? I guess it would depend on what's happening. But don't be caught off guard. You can at least think and reflect as parents on these two questions. And hopefully you will never have to use those ever. But we can certainly show them what kindness looks like. When you're looking on your own screens and you find those stories, those stories that you see on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and you're like, wow, that's awesome. I have faith in humanity again. When you find those stories of people really doing great things online for each other, share those with your kids so they know that good stuff happens there too, and not just the bad. I'm going to wrap it up with being savvy. Being savvy is, again, all about encouraging good uses and good habits. So one of the things that I also ask students when I talk to them is, how do you know if someone who's trying to connect with you, like friend you on a social network, is actually the person that this says they are, right? Because it's so easy to take an image and pretend it's you and open up an account and be that person, right? It's called catfishing. Believe it or not, some kids are pretty savvy. They already know one thing you can do, and that's called a reverse image search. Reverse image search. Take the image of someone's profile and put it on the internet and do a reverse image search on it. And you can see whether that image has appeared in other places, like let's say an online magazine or another person's account with a different name. And that's a pretty good sign that account probably isn't one you want to friend or have anything to do with. It's all about what you can trust and what you can't online. Another thing is about teaching our children good media literacy skills. How do I know that the story I just read is actually legit? Is that real, or is that misinformation? And the way that you can do that is simply by encouraging them to ask great questions. Pause when you read a story, especially one that's trying to elicit a lot of emotion from you. That's a good signal to say, ooh, you know what? I need to stop here a second. I need to kind of check this out and see if it's actually real, this story. So there's a bunch of questions that you can ask, that you can teach your children to ask. And we actually worked with the National Center for National Association for Media Literacy Education on a parent guide for media literacy. And it's a bunch of scenarios where your child might come to you and say, I heard about this thing online. And you can walk through, hey, here's how you can find out if that's real or a hoax or misinformation of some kind. This is probably one of the most important skills we can be teaching our children right now. We probably need to practice it ourselves as adults too. But by doing this, you can help stop spreading misinformation. So before you respond to something, share it, like it or whatever, you should also be asking yourself all of these questions. Make sure there's a second source that backs it up before you start doing anything with that information. On encouraging good habits, I'd like to ask you, have you ever looked yourself up online? Have you ever looked up your own name on Google or Bing or some other search engine? Put it in the chat. Have you ever looked yourself up? And put in the chat, what did you find when you looked up your own name? I found that someone with my name owns this hospitality business in San Diego. I'm calling in from Boston, by the way. I'm in Boston. I found someone with my name that you could write in prison. Neither of these people were me. That's great. I'm glad you found some things. Some of it, you actually found something about yourself that was made public. And some of you have found what we call your cyber twin. Your cyber twin shares your name. It's a good idea for your children. And I've actually asked students this question, have you ever looked yourself up? You'll be surprised at how many of them raise their hands. Ask your own kids tomorrow if you haven't had that conversation before. Some of them actually find information about themselves. They've told me, I was selling cookies for my Girl Scout troop, or I was in a school play and it was in the local newspaper, or I helped raise money or clean up a schoolyard or something. I was in the news. Great. It's good to know what's out there about you. Okay. There is a way. Oh, sorry. The reason is because if someone shares your name and there's some not so flattering information, we want to be able to explain to people that's not us, right? So one way that you can keep tabs of whether or not your child's name is ever posted online, or even your own name, is by setting up a Google alert. Go to google.com/alerts, and you can enter any name, any word, any phrase, and you will be alerted as frequently as you like. Anytime information that contains that word or name or phrase becomes publicly available on the internet, okay? That way you don't have to type in your child's name every time. You will just get alerts coming to you. And the reason that's important is a couple of things, okay? The first is we've been following the Kaplan Institute for some time. Since 2014, they've been doing a study with college admissions officers. Now, some of your children are still too young, but this is just something to think about because, mine's already looking at colleges now, and I still remember when I was changing her diapers, and it happens in a flash. They'll be looking at colleges or whatever their next step is out of high school as soon as you blink. Anyway, they've been asking these admissions officers since 2014, beyond the application that you get from the students, do you ever look them up online? The first year that they asked the question, I think the answer was 25% said yes. And the next year, 30, 35, and so on. About 2 years ago, they changed the question to, well, they still ask, would you look up students online to find out more beyond their application? So we're up to 65% now saying that they would. But this is the second part of the question that I thought was really interesting. Okay, it's the what did you find? If you looked, what did you find? Well, 58% that looked found something that was not flattering, that basically made them decide this is not the kind of student we want at this community. But 42% found something that convinced them that is who we want. So the point here being that it's not necessarily about teaching our children what to hide or what not to do. It could very well benefit them if they're also learning to use the internet in ways that they don't mind the world seeing. The 42% that are saying, I found something really great, and that it made the decision for me that they belong here. So what they don't want to find, they don't want to find something bad, but they also don't want to find nothing. So what does that mean for your kids? And certainly if they're really young, maybe not too much right now, but we can start to encourage good uses of the internet. Certainly learning new skills through YouTube, Khan Academy, TikTok has a learning channel now for things like cooking or crafts, or other skills too. But they could help, promote a cause or help raise funds for an organization they care about. And certainly if they have talents, even if they're still young, if they like to draw, write, they're a musician, a performer, an athlete, there are more and more specific apps geared towards those kinds of skills. And, I know for kids who are good writers, for example, you can easily start a blog and keep it behind a privacy setting until they're ready to show it to the public, or just make a password available to certain people about that writing. But if they're posting it on a blog, what they're showing is, I have mastered how to blog. I understand how to use the internet to showcase my work or to communicate to wide audiences. Okay. If they're really good at some skills, you can enter contests. Again, whether it's poetry or performance or music or drawing or video making, for example. That's another great way where they can use that skill, they can enter the contest. Maybe they don't win, that's fine. But they can start to build up a repertoire of things they entered, even if they never won. And if they win, great. They might get an honorable mention. They might win the whole thing, who knows? But that's a great way to direct positive uses of technology for our children, where they're enjoying it, but also doing something that could help them in the future. On that note, I actually want to put a plug in here. We've actually been running a video contest trend for the last 10 years. And the deadline is still 3 weeks away, May 4th. So if any of your kids like making videos, the grand prize is $10,000. And that would be shared between them and their school. So 5,000 would go to the student and 5,000 to their school. All they have to do in 2 minutes or less is answer one question. How did the internet help you get through this past year? We have a lot of entries in already. Go to whatsyourstory.trendmicro.com if you're interested, if you have kids, or even your school, if you have teachers who might want to do this as a project with their students. We heavily encourage this. So we'd love to see anybody here tonight participate in that. So, I just encourage you, as wrapping up here, to keep it going. Communication is key. Communication with your kids, staying up to date with everything that's new and going on with technology, because it's changing all the time. Communicating with the other parents in your own school community and with your school itself. This is not something you attend one night like tonight and then you're done. It isn't. It's something you constantly have to cultivate, learn, and take action on. And I challenge you all to do one new thing after tonight, something that you had not done before. Maybe it's set a Google alert, or look yourself up online, or turn on two-factor authentication, or use some of those free tools to do time limits. Whatever it is, pick one thing and do that tonight or tomorrow. I'm going to take questions now, and I see there's quite a few here. Let's see. Our biggest challenge with remote learning continues to be keeping kids on task and engaged during school time, especially for kids with ADHD. The temptation to, not be looking at the teacher and doing something else is too great. So you're using Circle to lock down now in your home, okay, but struggle some of the games that sneak in and they show up as a science or technology sites. Any suggestions on how to manage this? I think that Circle allows this, but I can tell you that security software on those devices like Trend's security software, or even some of the other competitors of Trend, you can actually do what's something called a walled garden, which means you can block all websites and then only add the ones you will let them use. So I will only allow this site, or this site. And that's a way to make sure they're not just wandering anywhere. So I hope that's helpful. But we in the technology industry, we call it walled garden. But basically you're creating a list, you're blocking everything and then only allowing the sites that you designate as okay. So I don't know if Circle allows for that, but I do know that security software, the big ones like Trend and McAfee and Norton, all have that capability. So if you have it on the device that your child's using, that could help. Let's see. My daughter is addicted to YouTube and Roblox. Any suggestions? Well, time limits. I think, first of all, if that happened during the pandemic when you had to keep her home and safe and your community safe, I think it's not, don't feel badly about that. But I do think if she's using YouTube, it depends on whether she's creating or just consuming, first of all. If she's creating videos, I think if she's under 13, then she's really not old enough to have an account on YouTube in the first place. And I would direct that energy towards things like contests, for example. If she's just watching a lot of the content on YouTube, then I think it's really something you will have to monitor, be near her, depending on her age, just monitoring that. Roblox, I think both of these sites, you can manage the screen time using, for YouTube, you can use Google Family Link or Apple's screen time. It depends on the device that your child is using to connect to YouTube or Roblox. I would highly recommend using one of those two tools. So if she's using Android devices, use Google Family Link to limit time. If she's using an iPad or iPhone, use iOS screen time. Can you show the contest again? Absolutely. I'm more than happy to do that. Here it is. whatsyourstory.trendmicro.com is where you should definitely go. I'd love to see somebody here enter that contest. That'd be great. Love it. Let's see, any other questions we have here? I think we just have some hellos on the questions. Feel free to enter them in the Q&A. If you, and I prefer that's in the Q&A. It's easier for me to monitor questions than in the chat. Okay, we have another question here. How do I know if my child is being bullied? Well, that's a tough one. I mean, there are some signs, and I highly recommend, by the way, resources from the Cyberbullying Research Center. If you look up the Cyberbullying Research Center, they have fantastic resources for students, for schools, and for parents. And they have a great resource list of signs that your child might actually be being bullied. But oftentimes, the telltale signs are they're withdrawing. They seem to be, they've lost their appetite, they've lost interest in conversation or school or anything else. It's something, you can tell that something's really bothering them. It doesn't mean they're going to be forthcoming to you. They might not want to talk about it. But those are some telltale signs. And I think if you can't get your child to talk to you about it and you have suspicion, I would recommend contacting your pediatrician, and because there might be someone that they're willing to talk to about it. The worst thing you can do is to let it go unchecked and unmanaged. If your child doesn't want to talk to you, make sure they have someone that they can talk to, for sure. How do we watch this again? Oh, yes, I'm going to show you my contact information in a second. So if you email that address that you see on the contact information, you will receive a copy of the link of the recording from tonight. How can I track who my child has been speaking to online? Well, there are ways that you can do this. One of the best ways, I think, short of spending a lot of money on products to do this, is, especially if your child is younger, I think you need to agree with them that you can check their phone if you need to. And it's not necessarily because you don't trust them. It could be because you could be worried about what other people might be doing and saying to them. And so I think that's a condition, especially for kids who are pretty young, who aren't paying for their own phone yet, to say, this is your phone, but we're still paying for it. And if I need to check it every once in a while, I'm going to do that. But that's really the best way to do it. The other is having constant conversations with them about what they're doing online. I think establishing good lines of communication early is the best thing to do. Okay, are you able to send me a list of participants? Oh, I think it's possible. I'm not sure we'll be able to tell who is from Moorfield Middle School. Anyone from Moorfield Middle School? You can identify yourself in the chat and let them know. Or you can email me and I'll be able to verify who here tonight was from Moorfield Middle. I hope that was helpful. Any suggestions for the first gaming system and safety? We're looking into the Nintendo Switch. Yeah, I think all of them are pretty good. There's two things about the consoles that you have to consider. Number one, the games themselves follow a rating system, and most of them have a feature that says, I will only allow games for this age, whether it's E for everyone, T for teen, or I forget the rating names. You can set it so that if a game gets inserted that doesn't meet that criteria, it won't play. I know that's true of the Xbox. So games is the one part of them. The other part of gaming consoles is their computers. So they can actually do the things like open up a web browser and start searching stuff online. So you've also got to be conscientious of that capability. And I would say that all of them have gotten better over the years with regard to safety. So allowing only certain age games is probably the big one you want to be careful of. But then within the game itself, that's where you're going to have to worry about them playing with people they don't know. Microsoft and Nintendo can only do so much. It's the game developers. You've got to consider whether or not those game developers are managing their environments in ways that you feel are okay for your kids. And if you're not okay with that game, then you need to consider other games until they're ready. Can you go over the acronyms kids use to hide from parents? Acronyms. There's a list of acronyms, again, on Cyberbullying Research Centers. They have a great list. There's another one with PTO Today, with whom we've sponsored tonight's event, that I can send out. If you send me an email, I will make that available to you. You'll see in a second the list of resources that are available for this. Let's see. I think we had about as high as 120 something people tonight. I wasn't sure what the highest was tonight. So the question was how many people were there. I would like to know who's here tonight from Renaissance Academy Charter School of Arts. My recommendation for all of you attending tonight, please reach out to your PTO or PTA president or whoever organized the event for your school tonight and let them know that you were here tonight. I think that's probably the best way to track attendance. I hope that's helpful. We don't require registration because we want to make it as easy as possible for people to attend. Just click a button and you're in. So that's the reason we don't require registration. So I've got a lot of questions about my email address. Before we get there, resources that we have under internetsafety.trendmicro.com. Lots of tip sheets here, as well from us, actually available in 9 languages as well. And we'd love for you to join us on Wednesdays. Every other Wednesday, we actually host a webinar series with experts from all around the country. And today we actually had one on kids with autism and how to help make sure that technology use is safe and healthy for them. All of these are recorded and available for you to view at internetsafety.trendmicro.com. We've had some fantastic experts. When you close out from tonight, I appreciate it if you could actually fill out a really quick survey. I'd love your feedback. And leave your email address, because if you do, you might be one of 5 people to win a year subscription to Trend Micro Maximum Security for up to 5 devices in your home. So that could do some of the filtering that we talked about tonight, and also protect your kids who might be clicking on anything. Here's my contact information at long last. I'm a very active on Twitter. That's where I'll be posting information once it becomes available about this new YouTube capability. I try to keep people up to date on lots of these changes. So follow me on Twitter if you wish. I'm also on LinkedIn if you'd like to follow me there too. And you can email me at Lynette_Owens@trendmicro.com. Lynette_Owens@trendmicro.com. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, I want to thank Gigi and Constantine and Mani, who helped us with translations tonight. I apologize to those who were trying to listen in for the Russian translation. We will be hosting several more sessions coming up. The next one actually is on April 27 at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And the one after that is May 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And there's another one after that as well. But if you go to our website, internetsafety.trendmicro.com, you will see all of our events listed there. So we will make it available in Russian and any other languages. We try to serve our community with whatever languages they request of us. Thank you again. It was a pleasure to spend this evening with you, and I hope I answered your questions. I hope you do that one new thing tonight. And I wish you all the best as you get to the final stretch of this school year. Thank you.